Hello everybody, hope you are okay and doing all right, whether you're pre-op or post-op. This is our second bariatric support group, so I hope you enjoyed the first one, whether you were there live or whether you got the chance to watch the recording. Again, this is the recording of the presentation element, and I'll give you some tools and tips in the presentation. And I have not recorded the live discussion that we had amongst us as a group, because I want to keep that private to whoever turns up in the group. And therefore, if you do want to talk about certain things, please come to the group. Or if that time doesn't let you know, it doesn't work for you, then let me know. And if I get a lot of people saying a different time works, well, I can look to either adapting it or maybe, you never know, put a second one on as well. So for those of you who are tuning in for the very first time, my name is Kim Rutherford. I am a psychotherapist based up in Liverpool. I focus on and specialise in mental health and mental well-being. Mental health being things like stress, burnout, depression, anxiety, and those issues and conditions that fall under the brackets of anxiety disorders and mood disorders. But with regards to mental well-being, I focus on developing those healthy skills, emotional management, emotional regulation, thought processes. So I really focus on the cognitive side of how do you ensure that you've got a healthy mind so that you can try to prevent it from developing into mental health areas. The reason that I do these sessions is because I am on my own bariatric journey. Currently, I am due to have my operation this very Saturday, and I will be having the gastric sleeve. And so throughout this process, I will share with you my personal experiences. The group will share their personal experiences, and I will share with everybody my professional knowledge and professional experiences of the psychological blockers that can come during the bariatric journey, and also the tools that can help you unblock those psychological issues as you travel through. So today I wanted to focus predominantly on emotions. And for those of you who remember watching last week, we covered this in quite a lot of detail. This is 8 Whys. It's the program, the specific psychological program that I have developed for helping people, whether they have mental health issues or mental well-being. So it's a recovery and a prevention model. And everything I want to cover today is part of this program. So I won't go into a lot of detail again today. If you want to know more about it, then obviously you can go and watch the previous video and all the information's there. But everything I'm talking about today very much focuses on the big red love heart sat at the top there, which represents emotional wellness. So we're talking about emotions, and it all links to our emotional wellness with regards to 8 Whys. So when we're talking about emotions, we really need to start understanding them. What tends to happen is we get them quite confused. And this is very common for most of us to get them confused, because there's a vast difference between emotions, feelings, and mood. So starting with emotions, emotions are a very intense reaction to a very specific incident. They are a response of chemicals being released in your system, and that chemical release lasts about 6 seconds. So when it comes to emotional responses, you don't have any control over them. You are constantly responding to what the world around is throwing at you, and you have no idea how you're going to emotionally respond to something until you do it. So when somebody says to you, you need to be able to change your emotions, you can't actually do that. It's not as simple as, oh, I'm just going to think about something different. It doesn't work that way. When it comes to feelings, this is where the biggest confusion comes on board, because what feelings are, they're the cognitive thinking process of the emotions. So the emotion is triggered through a life event. This chemical release happens, and what it does is it then forces a cognitive thinking process with regards to those emotions. And it's that cognitive thinking of the emotions that creates the feeling. And when we feel something, we feel it emotionally, and we feel the physical sensation of it as well. So the emotion is triggered, the thinking process regarding the emotion kicks in, which creates a set of feelings. And it's our feelings that we have more power and more control over managing. And then we've got our moods. Now, moods are much less intense than emotions or feelings. They tend to be something that grow over a period of time, so they can start to be very subtle and then get almost bigger and bigger and bigger. And moods are influenced by factors such as our overall environment, our physiology, and our mental state, meaning that our emotions and our feelings are part of what creates our specific mood. And it's important to understand the three differences, and it's important to understand which ones you have more control and power over influencing in the everyday moments. You can control and you can manage your feelings because it's a cognitive thinking pattern, and therefore you can manage cognitive thinking. And with regards to mood, because we know it's built up of multiple factors, we can change mood or definitely influence the change in mood by making some big changes in those extra factors as well. Now, here's some basic facts for you about emotions. So emotions, number one, there are electrochemical signals that they flow through us in an unending cycle. It's going on all of the time. They're released in our brains and they flow throughout all of our body. And they are a response to our perceptions of the world around us. So if you remember last week, we talked about mindset and how you collect all of your memories and experiences. Well, they create that mindset and those perceptions. So it's all of that that leads you to have the emotional responses that you have, which is why you can't just change your emotions when you want to, because they're coming from a very deep-rooted place. Emotions are neutral, which means that there is no such thing really as a good or a bad emotion. They're just a message. They are just telling you something about a situation. Emotions function to guide us to survive and thrive, because what they do is they force us to focus our attention on a specific thing, and therefore it motivates us to do something about that, to change the course of action and to move forward. So they're very much a part of that primal instinct of survival and evolution. We feel an emotion in order to help us get ourselves out of a situation, and the process linked to the emotion then allows us that motivation and drive to move forward from it, bringing in the evolving and the evolution process. Each emotion has a core purpose, so everything matters. So when people say, oh, you're too emotional, that can only be a good thing, because there are such a vast amount of emotions you can experience, and therefore you should be able to experience, because they all benefit you in some way. So an example of this is anger. Anger is a signal that your path is blocked. It focuses your attention on the threat, and then it motivates you in the response of fighting or pushing through the obstacle. It can be used destructively, of course, and many of us have probably experienced that, but it also gives us the energy to find solutions to pressing the problems. So what tends to happen, we become so agitated by the anger that forces us to have this major focus on how do we resolve the problem in hand. On the opposite side of anger, you have joy. Now, joy focuses our attention on an opportunity, and it motivates us to do more of whatever we are doing that creates that feeling of joy in the first place. So a feeling of joy is telling us this is good for you, you should be doing this more often. We feel joy when we experience meaning and connection, and the purpose of the emotion is to tell us that those are good things which we should need all the time and should be constantly seeking out in our lives. So emotions, as you can see from those two, they're not good or bad. They're messages. They're messages telling us that there is a different way to be living our lives, and we should be focusing on how we get there. Now, emotions are also very, very contagious. They can spread like a virus. You can catch both negative and positive emotions from different people. And this is because we're pack animals, and we're supposed to have this sensory element to our systems so that we can interact and communicate effectively with our pack. And so it's primal for us to be able to share our emotions so clearly. Hence, sometimes you can find that, if a group of people are in a bad mood, that can lead to everybody being in a bad mood. It's where hysteria comes from, when a few people start to react in a certain way, and that hysteria, that wider set of hysterical emotions, start to then trigger other ones. And it's also why you can get worldwide phenomenons with regards to emotions, such as, I use the example a lot of when Princess Diana died. It hit everybody as if it was a genuine bereavement for each individual. And that's not because we all felt it as a bereavement to ourselves, although it felt like a major loss. We didn't feel the bereavement personally, we felt the bereavement en masse. And that's because the bereavement emotion was catching on from those people who did know her. Emotions are different than feelings and moods, as I've already spoken about, but they're very much interrelated. But the core difference between all of them is the amount of time you or we spend with them. So as I said, 6 seconds for emotions. Feelings take longer, mood takes even longer. And when I say time, I mean the time that our cognitive thoughts are involved with that particular area. And emotions are absorbed in the body in about 6 seconds. Each burst of emotional chemical, from its time that it's produced in the hypothalamus, which is the central part of the brain, to the time it's completely broken down and absorbed, this lasts about 6 seconds. So if you're highly emotional, you're getting little sparks, 6 seconds of all of these different emotions. And as you can imagine, because as we know it starts in the brain and filters down the whole body, we start to get the physical sense of all of that. That's what then triggers the thinking process. And if we don't do something about that, that longer term effect then creates that mood. Now, emotions are very physical. And as you can see by the diagram here, this gives you some idea of which parts of the body different emotions are affecting more than others. Now, the emotions that most of us are really wanting to experience over and over again, happiness and love. And if you can see about them both, you can kind of understand why. So happiness, emotion is energy. And the way that emotion works, because it's a chemical, it's an energy, it then attaches itself to different parts of the body. And as you can see, all the chemicals that relate to the emotion of happiness are so strong and so powerful that they actually link to every single organ within your body, which is why it feels like you are literally warm and fuzzy and glowing all over. So it's no wonder that we're all trying to achieve happiness. Sadly, happiness is not a long-term state. It's something we should experience, but we should not live in a stage of happiness. That doesn't really make much sense. We should be able to go up and down effectively with our emotions. And so we should always be aiming towards a neutral, and therefore we can experience the emotion and then bring it back down to a neutral phase afterwards. And that's what we call emotional regulation. But as you can see there, happiness takes over the whole body. And the other one we always want to experience is love. And as you can see there, love takes over a majority of the body as well. All of what we call the good emotions are all glowing in this beautiful orange and yellow color, so pride and love. But we've also got anxiety there and anger there, which is also quite strong in where it affects us. But if you look at depression, what depression is telling you that actually our levels have gone much lower, almost coldness. And those people that do experience regular periods of depression have that sense of numbness. And that's what it's coming from, this concept that our emotions are just draining the energy out of all of our organs. Which is why suppressing emotion is not healthy for us, because if we suppress emotion, we're not allowing that energy to burn off. And if you can imagine all of those different levels of energy building on top of each other all the time because we don't ever do anything about them, you can understand why our emotions and our history with our emotions can cause us so many problems. So certain parts of the body, especially the upper half, are heavily stimulated during emotion. So love, happiness, pride, as I said. And depression and sadness are linked to numbness. So it's what we're looking at is what stimulates and what then understimulates, or should I say, removes any energy from us. And what we've also got to bear in mind is that emotions are a spiral. They spiral up and they spiral down. So they're either expansive when they're coming up or they're contractive when they're going down. And one of the issues that we might have is sometimes when we're feeling in one state, we want to do everything we can to jump directly to the opposite. So for example, we might be feeling despair and shame. What we want to do is feel the opposite, which is looking at love and appreciation. But it's actually quite unrealistic to expect ourselves to jump so quickly and so high on our emotional ladders. And what we need to do is learn to understand what the different stages of emotions are so that we can start putting in place the small steps to move up to the next one. So for example, currently on LRD, I've also decided to self-isolate because I didn't want to catch COVID before I go and have my op on the weekend. And it came to a head on Sunday, and I won't lie, I was bored as hell. I was getting really frustrated, and I could feel that contractive process kicking in. Boredom came in, frustration came in. I was like, am I doing the right thing? Then all the worry and the panic, I start to feel anxiety coming in, and it all goes into that spiral. And so I knew I needed to do something about it. Because it started at boredom, I was like, okay, where's the next stage I can get to? And the next stage is contentment. Because if I can start to feel content with where I am right now, I can then start to retrain the brain to start looking and moving up that spiral again. So for me, what did I do? It was Sunday, I'd been bored all day, I was going mad with myself. So it was nice and simple. I put a nice fire on, I turned the lights off, I watched what Adele was doing on TV, and then suddenly I'd created this lovely cozy space that I was really safe in, really comfortable in. I was watching something I was enjoying, and suddenly I had that sense of contentment. Just through those small changes, I had a sense of contentment. From that contentment, I was like, okay, I start to feel hopeful now, and I can start looking at it as, yes, I've survived these many days of LRD, and yes, I've survived this much isolation. I can keep doing this. And then what happens, it starts to bubble away. It's not long to go now. I'm now quite eager to get this done, and I'm excited and I'm enthusiastic again. And I started to use my expansive part of my emotional cycle. So the key to remembering when it comes to the emotional cycle is, so many people desire, especially when they feel the deep suffering of emotions, the longing and the misery, for it to be the complete opposite. But the trick is to realize that as humans, we only have access to an emotional step in either direction. We can't jump all the steps, just like you can't jump from the bottom rung of a ladder right to the top. It's a climb. And so what we have to do is make those simple steps, small changes, changes in concept, changes in thought, changes in activity to help move us in one direction or the other. I mean, we can't simply jump for joy. So the idea is to accept where we are, accept it, acknowledge it, know it, understand the feeling, and understand that it's positive to know what that feeling is, and then what can you do to move to the next step. And a lot of the time, this may require you doing something to trigger the next emotion, which is what I had to do. I had to trigger contentment through changing my environment and by changing what I was actually doing. Thank you, Adele. Post-surgery, we will, and most of you who've had surgery will already know, experience an awful lot of emotions. So post-surgery, it's possible to experience a range of conflicting emotions as well. Because on the one hand, you're going to be really happy the procedure has been done and it's completed successfully. And on the other hand, there's this sudden weight loss, which can trigger emotions that you weren't really expecting, and therefore they're quite unfavorable. The psychiatric consequences, for example, these are the conflicting emotions that are normal after any surgery, not just weight loss surgery. Because when you have such a dramatic change, you need time to adjust. They call it the transitioning phase. And it's why a recovery process takes around about 12 weeks, because your recovery isn't just your body healing, it's your mind transitioning from where you were pre-op to where your life is now post-op. And you need to accept it is a life change, not just because you've had surgery, you can't eat the way you wanted to, but because everything about you has now changed, and you have to embrace that, but you have to give yourself time to adjust to that transition. They've done loads of research on this, and according to some analysis, they did 68 studies, that approximately 25% of bariatric clients, they're going to suffer from a temporary mood disorder. Focus on the word temporary, it isn't forever, and the most common one being depression. And the reality of it is the best way to combat these feelings is to know that it's likely they're coming, and therefore prepare for them. So the best way to counteract some depression, which is mental health, you counteract it with mental well-being, and mental well-being counteracts your mental health. Now, if you're in a situation where you have depression, the way you recover from it is through mental well-being. So mental well-being is absolutely crucial. Hence, the 8 Whys model that I share with you guys is a recovery model for those experiencing mental health issues, as well as a prevention tool for those who are trying to prevent it from happening. It's very possible that one of your fears after surgery is being judged. So we know that you're going to get loads of compliments. You're going to look fabulous, and so you're going to get loads of compliments. But there might still be that weird worry that you're going to be judged by people if you tell them what's going on. And then therefore there's that insecurity of sharing everything with people starting to ask you the questions constantly or checking in on you constantly, especially when it's such a personal thing and it's private, it's personal to you. So the recommendation is only share the journey with people who you trust, people who really need to be a part of this journey with you. Because if they don't need to be a part of the journey with you, they don't need to know what you've chosen to do to the inside of your own body. That is your choice and your personal choice, and it can be private. And therefore, if anybody says to you, oh my God, you look amazing, how did you do it? The truth is through a lot of hard work. And you don't have to tell them anything more than that if you don't want to, because that is the truth. You are doing this through hard work. And if they want to know a little bit more, you make it clear. I did it through hard work. I've had to watch what I'm eating. I've had to change what I'm eating. And I've had to change how I think about food and exercise. That is all true. It's all factual, and none of it gives enough detail. You have to accept that there's lifetime behavioural changes, and change can be really, really hard. The reality of giving up the foods that have been your best friend, as dangerous and as destructive as a best friend has been, it's hard to give that up. And it's hard to suddenly become somebody who loves exercise just because you've got to do it now and it's part of who the new you is. It takes time for all of these things. So realistically, if you're not willing to make the necessary behavioural changes, it will significantly diminish your chances of long-term success. And the transition for those behavioural changes can be very, very emotional. Now, there's also the physical consequences, and most of us who are pre-op are very, very scared of this. And I'm guessing this is something that most of you post-op are very aware of as well. And this is the things like the sagging skin and the hair loss, and that your new body shape might be different to what you want it to be, and you might not look how you want to be, and that can bring a lot of feelings that aren't so great. And so the only way to counteract that is body positivity. And it's about celebrating your body, celebrating how much your body's got you through, and celebrating how amazing your body is as the vessel, because it is the vessel for the life you choose to live. And therefore we should respect it, and we should learn to honor it a little bit. And it can be difficult when it's going through changes, and changes that could be happening very fast and are out of our control. So it's really important to stay on top of body positivity. It's not a buzzword, or should I say, it's not just a buzzword shared on social media. It's a really important psychological state. So emotions and depression. There is evidence that there is a mental health danger zone that happens between the 2nd and 3rd year post-surgery. Now, it can happen for lots of reasons. One of them is if you're not following your post-surgical diet and exercise regimes, then you're likely to put on weight again, or you start to regain weight, which can obviously make you feel depressed or anxious. You're going through such a major life change in order to lose this weight. The fear of putting the weight on again can be really, really toxic for us. And so it's about making sure that if we have been given, and we've all been given, post-surgical diet advice and exercise advice, then we need to be sticking to that if we want to make sure we do not regain the weight, which means we need to change the habits and the thinking processes that led to the weight gain in the first place. Now, during the first 18 to 24 months after surgery, because our gut hormones have been removed, they're the ones that our hunger has now been regulated, and that's going to be great, and it will last for a long time, which means that we can stick to those smaller portions. It won't be an issue. But what happens after a while is our body starts to adapt, and our body starts to change, and different mechanisms then come into place which kickstart that appetite again. And that's when it can all become stimulated again, which is why really at 2 to 3 years you start looking at, oh God, I can almost eat the same portions maybe as I did before. It's not as restricting as it was. I can feel hunger again, which is really unpleasant, and it can kickstart our whole cycle, a danger cycle of that depression and anxious emotions, thoughts and moods. So it's really important to keep on top of maintaining those smaller portions and that exercise and everything else that you learn to do to manage these emotions, so that when that does happen and your hunger does kick back in again, you're in control by then. It can't trigger old past behaviors and habits because they don't exist anymore. And the psychological issues that are inherent in most people who have bariatric surgery tend to kick in after bariatric surgery and then sabotage their weight loss. This means those things such as bad eating habits, emotional eating, bad relationships or poor relationships with food, all of those things that led to us being obese. Let's make this perfectly clear. We didn't become obese just because we overate. That's common sense. The body can only handle so much. But we knew overeating was unhealthy. We knew it's harming us in some way. So for us to be doing that much self-harm to us on a regular basis and not stopping, that has to be a psychological issue. To be addicted to food is a psychological issue. To be addicted to doing something that continuously creates self-harm, which is what obesity is, there has to be a psychological issue. And therefore you need to overcome the psychological issue in order to prevent yourself from sabotaging your longer term weight loss. And we've got to be realistic that all of this stuff, all of these things that could come back in place in 2 to 3 years' time, they're going to release a load of new chemicals for us. All of those new emotions, shame, feeling worthlessness, leading to low mood, experiencing low mood for a long time, which if you experience low mood and it affects you in multiple different ways for a period of 2 weeks or more, that's when we know you've got depression. So we've got to be aware, and it's good to be aware. It's good to know that this is probably going to happen, that our mental health is going to take a dip in around about 2 years' time, because now we know that we can prepare for it. And how do we prepare for it? We prepare by getting our mental well-being where it needs to be. So common symptoms of depression are something you need to know, just so that when you constantly check in with yourself through self-reflection, you can make sure that you're not seeing some of these symptoms. But if you are seeing some of these symptoms, you can get it dealt with quickly. So firstly, depression is a mood disorder. It involves persistent feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and a loss of interest in previously enjoyable activities. People with depression usually experience symptoms for more than 2 weeks across at least 3 of the following categories. There are 4 categories of symptoms: feelings, thoughts, physical, and behavior. And just take a look at those right now. It's important to be doing the self-reflection on a regular basis to identify if you are experiencing any of these symptoms within any of these areas. So we're looking at feeling overwhelmed or guilty or unhappy, miserable, sad, disappointed. We're looking at withdrawing from friends and colleagues, using, alcohol, or in this case, excessive food to cope with things. Those thoughts kicking in again of I'm a failure, it's my fault, I'm not good enough, I'm worthless. Well, those physical symptoms of constantly being tired, having sleep problems, things like that. It's really important for you to be able to identify your symptoms for any mental health issue. And with regards to bariatric surgery, we know depression is a potential big one, and therefore it's important to assess yourself regularly to make sure that you are not showing these symptoms. But if you are, it's okay. You can come out of this. I'm someone who experienced depression myself. I know for a fact you can come out of it. So weight loss triggers your depression, but why? Because these are kind of the common things that people say. So why would I be depressed when I'm losing weight? And ultimately losing weight is all I've ever wanted to do. And it's because after surgery, reality does not always live up to the preoperative fantasy. If we've dreamed about losing weight our whole lives, we've dreamed about looking a certain way and it going a certain way. And it doesn't mean it's going to go that way. And so it can take a while for the vision that we've had in our head for so long to align with the reality of the vision in front of us. Now, if I'm losing weight, I won't miss the food, as if losing weight is so strong it will overcome everything. But actually, post-operative patients can find themselves feeling as though they are on the outside of things, because most social activity within our culture focuses on food and drink. No matter what it is, even popping around to see your friend, it's all about having a cup of tea, maybe a biscuit, going for dinner, whether you stay in or whether you're out, celebrating with birthday meals. We look forward to Christmas because we look forward to Christmas dinner and presents of chocolates and everything else. So there are a lot of things that, although you can still be involved in, you won't be able to be involved in them in the way you were previously. And it can leave people feeling a little bit left out or outside of where the real fun of the party might be. When I can't eat after surgery, I'll lose weight and then I just won't go back to my old habits, as if weight loss changes your habits. It doesn't. Emotional eating or binge eating or any other issue regarding food that forces you to eat, none of that changes post-surgery. It may reduce for a period of time, as we've established, about 2 years, but they almost always return if they've not been managed sooner, because they're habits, and they're habits you've developed over decades sometimes, and it doesn't happen. You can't change those things overnight without consciously putting the effort into changing them. I thought everything would get better after weight loss, but it didn't. Of course, it's not going to. If you're doing weight loss surgery to change other issues in your life, maybe bad relationships or, getting better job and all of these things that we hope are going to change, the reality of it is nothing in life changes after weight loss surgery other than your health with regards to obesity, medical issues potentially, and then your size and your overall weight. They're the 3 things that change. Everything other than that is not going to change through weight loss surgery. What we hope is that through the weight loss surgery and through the weight loss of feeling better and feeling healthier, that we develop more self-esteem and we develop more confidence. And through that, we then have more strength to be able to resolve other problem areas in our lives. But if we think surgery is going to be able to resolve it all, we're all going to be very, very sadly mistaken. And it's remembering that depression is commonly triggered from unrealistic expectations. And so it's important for us to set realistic expectations. That's why we say take a day at a time, because if you take one day at a time, you'll just focus on the reality of the moment rather than trying to live a life based on a fantasy that might never come true. Now, we know self-esteem can also be affected after weight loss surgery, because even though you might look good and feel different, actually you might feel very much the same on the inside. It takes a little bit longer to work through some of those deeper rooted issues. Your weight loss surgery is not going to cure your feelings. It can't cure your feelings and it can't stop the emotions. And I mean feelings like the inadequacy, the blame, the guilt, that self-hate that we go through, those much more deep-rooted parts of our psyche that have been developing over years and years and years. And you may still have body image issues afterwards, even when you get to your goal, for multiple reasons. But one of the biggest reasons, because it takes us a little bit more time to align what's in here with what we're seeing, because we've seen a picture in here that is completely different for a long, long time. In fact, for most of us, when we look in the mirror right now, when we're pre-op, we don't really see what's really there. We see a perception of what is there. How we feel about ourselves is what forces us to see what's there. And so that's going to change, but this part of us is going to change a lot slower. Self-image is incredibly complicated and it's affected by several factors besides weight. So past emotional trauma can have a major issue on this. So fat shaming, bullying, all of this kind of stuff. I've talked about it on Instagram. I might have talked about it in here. It's this concept of that inner critic, that little demon that we've got living inside of us, saying all of that horrible crap to us, making us feel bad, which can lead to self-sabotage. The words they use, the voice of that demon, it might sound like you now, but it never was. It started off with the words of other people. And what we've done is we've sucked them all up as a sponge and created this really ugly voice from it. And we bully ourselves with that voice regularly. And one of the biggest things we need to do to get through this surgery with a better psychological approach to everything is we need to be able to sort that demon out, get rid of those voices, get rid of those thoughts, and get rid of those opinions that were somebody else's words from a long time ago, and get back in touch with our own voice and make that a positive one for us moving forward. So these are just a few ways that you can help to boost your self-esteem. One, don't look at everything as a pass or a fail. Life is not black and white, okay? There are gray areas. There are going to be millions of bumps in the road. Yeah, some of them might be Mount Everest, but the likelihood, most of them are small bits of gravel that are easily overcoming and just a leftover from lots of different jobs that you've done before. So don't overthink it. Don't look at yourself as, oh my God, I failed because I had that slice of pizza today. That's irrelevant. It's not a bump in the road. It's okay to eat food. Any food is still okay. It's knowing when to pull back, or when it's making you unwell is when to pull back. Compliment yourself regularly. You're fabulous. What you're doing is amazing. It's a hard journey. Give yourself the credit and compliment yourself head to toe. How wonderful you are, how smart you are, how clever you are, how beautiful you are, all the amazing things you've accomplished in your life so far. Treat yourself with kindness, nicely, with compassion. Don't bully yourself. Value your strengths and how they've helped you to become who you are, and all the wonderful things that you do in the life you've got. And if you can, use positive affirmations. Positive affirmations start teaching us to reframe our mindset into positive thinking, and that then absorbs into our subconscious, and we can use that a lot more moving forward. We need to do all of that because we're going to get lots of pressure coming at us from lots of different areas, which can cause some of these irregular emotions post-surgery. So first place, social pressures and situations. As I've already said, most of our social lives exist around food. And so we're going to have some social pressure from different situations. That's going to come from friends, from family, from work colleagues, from complete strangers. We've got to learn to regulate ourselves and learn how we are going to live in this new social environment. Already know. So for example, for me, I eat out a lot. It's what I love doing. Me and my friends, that's what we do. My choice moving forward is I'm going to pick small plate restaurants. Small plate restaurants, so I don't have to worry about it. Tapas, small plate restaurants, because that way I can have a small plate. I don't have to feel like I'm missing out. I'm involved in absolutely everything. And the people that I'll be sharing those meals with are going to know. If I've got to go on works, nights out, and all of that kind of stuff, I'm just going to say to people, I don't feel like eating. I'm not going to hide why. I'm not going to tell them the detail. I'm not going to pretend. I might just say, oh, do you know what? Not been feeling too great these last few days, so I'm not going to eat too much. And that way it takes the pressure off. People go, oh no, fair enough, hope you're okay. And that's enough. Serotonin depletion. Serotonin is the feel-good chemical that happens when it happens within our brain. It floods our body. It's brilliant. When we have low serotonin levels, that's when we tend to find that we experience depression. Obviously, you can get medication that is high in serotonin. But what happens post-surgery, a lot of the serotonin that we get when we are obese is from the unhealthy foods for us, such as the carbohydrates and the high sugars. So we're going to feel some serotonin depletion. We don't want to rush down the medical route all the time, more and more medication, and I'll come to that in a minute. What we want to be able to do is find the foods, the natural foods, the healthier foods that have high levels of serotonin in them as well, and start incorporating them into our diet. Almonds, for example, is one. Now, medication malabsorption, I can never get that word out, is ultimately about the fact that because our bodies now function slightly different, they will absorb medications slightly different. Now, obviously, I work with an awful lot of people who are antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds, and what they find is those meds have a different effect on them after their surgery. It can be quite scary, and I'm guessing it's therefore quite the same with other people with other conditions. The key to medication is you keep doing your medication afterwards. If there is a change, you go and speak to your doctor, you talk through the new symptoms, and your doctor can then prescribe you with something that is more suitable for where your body is at now. Never just stop taking medication without the support of your doctor, because you've got so much chemical in your body to just suddenly stop, the body is going to go into chaos. And that, especially with mental health medication, it can really set you off on a really, really awful spiral. So please never come off medication unless you've spoken to your doctor or your psychiatrist, whoever's prescribed that medication for you. And then we have that internal pressure and those internal expectations, the ones we create for ourselves, those rules and regulations that are all in our own head and we've created. And if we don't meet those rules and regulations, we beat ourselves up, or we feel like failures, or we feel incredibly guilty. We need to create a better internal system, one with regulations and rules that work for us and not against us. But these are the 4 core areas that are going to cause us emotional issues post-surgery. Now, one of the big things we know, and this is not the only thing, but this is one of the big things that a lot of people who have been obese or are obese experience, is emotional eating. Emotional eating is a neglect. Okay, focus on that word. It is neglect. It's a neglect of our body's natural hunger and fullness signals. So we're ignoring what is our body's naturally telling us. And because we do that, it forces us to eat more than we really need or what we want. And it tends to be triggered through negative and or the concept of positive emotions. So any emotion can trigger it. And for those of you emotional eaters, I'm an emotional eater. If I'm stressed out or I had a bad day, I'm gorging. If I've had a brilliant day, and I'm gorging because I'm rewarding. Either way, what I'm actually doing is suppressing the real emotion that I'm feeling. I'm trying to fill the void or burn the energy with lots of extra food. Now, each organ in our body, as we've seen, is affected by emotions. And that's also because each organ generates some kind of emotion. So particular foods can lead to particular emotions because they affect particular organs. So for example, alcohol. Alcohol affects the liver because what it does is it blocks the liver from functioning effectively. And because it affects the liver, it results in emotions linked to the liver. And the emotions linked to the liver are things like annoyance, anger, aggression, or impatience, which is why the day after a great drinking session and you've got a hangover, you're probably a little bit annoyed, anger, aggression, maybe a little bit agitated and incredibly impatient. For some people, that also can lead down to anxiety as well. Now, tryptophan, it's an amino acid that triggers the release of serotonin. So this is good. We want to have it because we want to have the serotonin. And serotonin deficiency has negative effects on our body because it can create sadness and irritability. So with weight loss surgery, it can lead to serotonin deficiency because, as I've said, it reduces the serotonin coming from those food groups that you used to have as part of your main diet. So it is really, really important to find the foods that have either got serotonin in them or tryptophan in them. And I will be sharing a list of those foods on the Facebook group so you can actually start incorporating those into your diet. And the reality of it is emotional eating is an emotional eating cycle. So when we use the food to calm an emotion, we're also masking the deeper rooted emotion. And because we're masking it, we're never really resolving it. And that leads us to this vicious cycle of unresolved worries and problems and issues. And because it's an unresolved cycle, it constantly keeps triggering and triggering and triggering the emotional eating as well. It looks a bit like this. So something happens that triggers a strong emotional response. You then feel completely overwhelmed and urge yourself to eat. After that, you then eat more than you know you should, which then makes you feel guilty and powerless over food, which then leads to another strong emotional response, which then leads to you feeling more overwhelmed and then leads you to overeating again. And it goes round and round and round in that vicious cycle. And obviously there's lots of different life events that we're experiencing every single day. But here's a list of some of the most common ones that trigger emotional eating. Relationship conflicts, whether that's personal relationships, friends, family, colleagues. Feeling tired, exhausted, fatigued. Financial pressures. Health problems in general. Childhood habits, so learning something in childhood. Sudden boredom, which is what my issue was on the weekend. Continual emotional stuffing, so suppressing those emotions down, stuffing your emotions down, thinking that if you can't experience them, they'll go away, because they don't. And then obviously social influences as well. Now what happens is, in order to counteract this cycle, you need to be able to learn to understand the difference between emotional hunger and your true physical hunger. So to do that, you need to be able to break the cycle by being able to stay in touch with the physical signs of hunger and ignoring the emotional hunger signs. And these look like this. So emotional hunger comes on suddenly. It feels like it needs to be instantly satisfied. It's a craving for a specific food or group of foods. It's not satisfied when you're feeling full. It triggers feelings of guilt, shame, or powerlessness, and it often leads to ongoing mindless eating. So, for example, I've had the bad day, I'm just going to have a nice cup of tea on the sofa with a biscuit, and within 10 minutes, all the pack of biscuits is gone, and you don't understand why, because you don't remember eating them. Physical hunger, on the other side of it, is it comes on gradually and it can wait, which is why people say, give yourselves 10, 20 minutes to decide, do I really need to eat right now? Many foods sound like brilliant. They're brilliant. There's an openness to lots of food options when you're genuinely hungry. You don't crave a specific food. Eating it stops when you're full. It doesn't make you feel bad about yourself, and it doesn't lead to a loss of control. So the one thing I've learned actually is about understanding my physical hunger much more since I've been doing LRD, because I'll be really, really, really hungry, and I'll just be like, I don't know what I want, and I'm only going to have a shake anyway. But the second I have my shake, I feel absolutely fine again. And I think that's because at this moment I am consciously putting more effort into managing my emotional eating. And because with the LRD, I just said to myself, you're only doing shakes. I can't then have food. It's taken all of the thought process out of it. I'm able to understand and align and listen to my physical hunger a lot more, which is something I plan to do a lot moving forward. And in summary, physical and emotional hunger may be easily confused, but there are two key differences, or there are key differences between the two. Pay attention to how and when your hunger starts, as well as how you feel after eating. If you are somebody who experiences emotional eating, then I highly recommend journaling it. And it just means that when you know that you're having those thoughts, just write them down. Let's have a look at them, go back to them a little bit later and start to see them. Because when you start journaling, what you do is you take it from out of your head, you put it in front of you. So when you look at it, you're looking at it from a third person's perspective, not just your own personal perspective. It makes it much easier to assess and analyze and problem solve. So the big one is, how do we stop emotionally eating? Okay, we call this the AAA method. And as you can see, all of it's based on the A's. So the first A, acknowledge. Acknowledge the feeling of hunger and your current state of emotion. Allow it to happen. Own it. Acknowledge it. Don't ignore it. Assess. Assess your situation. So when is the last time you ate? Did this hunger come on quickly? Am I hungry for something specific? Where do I feel hungry? And can I wait 5 to 10 minutes to eat? By doing this process, by answering these questions, you're assessing your current hunger situation. And then the final A is achieve. Achieve success by finding a win-win solution that helps you deal with the emotion and solve your hunger. And this is about coming up with good self-care plans that when you know the emotional hunger is kicking in, to prevent the emotional eating, you find other things to do that you can do to stop that process. So in summary, food may help ease emotions initially, but addressing the feelings behind the hunger is important in the long term. Work to find alternative ways to deal with stress, like exercise and peer support, and try practicing mindful eating techniques. And then how do we combat the trigger? So as I said last week, stress becomes one of the biggest triggers for our emotional issues connected to food, and especially when it comes to eating and emotional eating. So we know that when it comes to the emotional side, we're looking at these negative feelings down here. So the way to break the cycle is, how do we remove something from the cycle in order to break the cycle? So if we know negative feelings are what are constantly being triggered, we need to look at the life event. So if the life event triggered the emotion, we've got to look at how we can change that particular life event. Negative thinking. So if negative thinking has triggered the emotion, how can you reframe your thinking? If the symptoms, if you've got physical symptoms are triggering your emotions, how can you manage those symptoms better to reduce the emotional release? And if your behaviors has triggered the emotion, how can you change your behaviors in order to break the cycle? The key is breaking the cycle. It's okay to have all of these things from time to time. You know, we are going to have stressful life events. We are going to have those moments when our thinking just isn't on form. We are going to experience feelings, etc., etc. We're going to experience everything on this cycle from time to time. But if we're aware of it and we know it's a cycle and we can capture it quickly and break one of these elements off, it stops it becoming dysfunctional. What it does is it puts us back in control. And sometimes that's as simple as all of this is, being able to focus on what we can control and let go of what we can't. So in summary, to counteract the depression slump that is common after the initial 2 years that can lead to relapse and poor mental health, you need to manage the emotional triggers and habits that led to obesity in the first place. And the way to do this is through mental well-being. Emotional well-being plays a big part of your mental health and your mental well-being. Understanding your emotions and allowing yourself to feel them so that you can analyze them and understand them puts you back in control of them. And eating foods that boosts your serotonin levels goes a long way to reducing the risk of mental health and periods of depression. If you look after your full wellness spectrum to reduce your overall stress, you will be in a better position to manage any of the emotions that come post-surgery, because a primary emotional trigger is stress. So manage the stress, prevent the emotional triggers. Which brings us back to 8 Whys, because as I said last week, that's what this is all about. 8 Whys is about learning to manage the stress that comes in your life, and it affects your different areas of wellness and well-being. So the red one being emotional wellness, beige is physical wellness, light blue is spiritual wellness, the yellow is intellectual wellness, the green is environmental wellness, the orange is our social wellness, the blue is all about our financial wellness, and our lilac there is our occupational wellness. These are the areas where stress triggers the most, and therefore these are the areas we need to learn to manage and balance and resolve and improve in order to reduce the stress. And as we know, it is a very stressful process post-op. And it will trigger all of these things. So if we can manage all of these, then we've got a really good position to manage everything longer term and reach that success we want. And I've just put that on there because I was getting a lot of people comment and contact me with regards to my book and all the bits and pieces that I've done with it. So to let you know, there are basically a few different products. The book itself is the 8 Whys Guide, 8 Whys Ways to a Happier, Healthier Mind. The concept of the book is it works as though you've got a psychotherapist in your hand. It explains about mental health and mental well-being. It explains the 8 Whys model in much more detail. And then the third part of it is an actual working book guide. So it gives you tasks, activities. It links to my website where you've got free self-assessments and you've got free tools to help you develop everything you need to develop in order to do what I call living the 8 Whys ways for better mental health and well-being. To support the book, I also developed a 12-week journal. The reason I developed a 12-week journal is because when it comes to goal setting, the most successful goals fall into 3 brackets: a short-term goal, a mid-term goal, and a long-term goal. And a short-term goal is something you can achieve within 12 weeks, because that's where your habits can change, it's where your motivation can change, and it's easier to focus on 12 weeks at a time. So the journal is there for someone who just wants to put a short-term plan in place to see how things go. But if you're someone who wants to commit more to these mid-term and longer-term goals, then what I've also developed is a 12-month planner, which again just builds on the concept of that journal, but really helps you to plan your day-to-day life around management of stress and being able to implement all of these different tools and techniques from the 8 Whys program. And that comes, the white one is actually the paperback and the grey one is a hardback. And the little one in the corner, which is due for release next week actually, is the new little pocketbook, which is just a tiny little pocketbook that allows you to make simple notes about certain things that you can carry around with you. So if anything plugs up, you've got some bits and pieces right there with some very simple tools that you can carry around with you every day. All of these are available everywhere, every bookshop, every bookstore. You can, anywhere that allows you to order books online, and obviously the big demon that is Amazon. If you are interested in any of these, then contact me directly and I will get you a discount for them, so you don't have to pay the same prices that you pay everywhere else, just as a little gift from me to you as you are in this group. So don't go to the big boys, come to me and I'll get you that discount and get it sent out directly from my office. And that, my lovelies, is the end of this week's session. So again, it's really important to manage your emotions, manage the psychological part of this journey so that you give yourself the best possible chance. The reality of this is we think this is all about the food. It isn't. The food is the easy bit because we won't be able to eat as much. We have to change the psychological elements to our life. We have to change our psychological connection to food, our relationship to food, how we respond to life using food. If we can do that, that puts us back in control of food. When we're in control of food, that's when we're looking at long-term success. So If this has triggered anything for you, if you would like any questions or queries answered with regards to anything that I've covered here today, then just get in touch and let me know. And because I am having my surgery this weekend, I won't be delivering next Monday's group session, but I do believe it will still be running with one of our fabulous members. So more information and more detail will be coming up about that a little bit later. And I will be sharing some more tools as documents and worksheets later today as well. So I hope you are all okay, whether you are pre-op or post-op. I wish you the best. And I will see you on the other side of my surgery. So until then, take care. And I will see you all very, very soon. Bye for now.